The sun filtered through the canopy of the African savanna, a golden haze illuminating the dry, grassy plains. Serena stood at the edge of the reserve, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She knew she shouldn't be here. Everyone had warned her. The reserve manager, her colleagues, even the rangers patrolling the area had all said the same thing. It was dangerous, reckless even, to seek out Leo again. But Serena had never been one to let fear dictate her actions, especially not when it came to the lion she had raised from a cub. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Leo wasn't just any lion. Serena had found him when he was barely a month old, abandoned and near death after his mother was likely killed by poachers. His tiny body was frail, his golden fur matted and dull, and his cries weak and pitiful. Serena, a conservationist working on the reserve, had taken him in despite the protests of her superiors. "It's against protocol," they'd said. "You can't domesticate a lion. He belongs in the wild." But Serena had persisted, feeding him with a bottle, teaching him to hunt, and above all, showering him with a kind of love that transcended species. For 2 years, they were inseparable. Leo grew from a fragile cub into a magnificent adolescent lion with a powerful build and a mane that had just begun to darken. He followed her everywhere, his amber eyes full of trust and curiosity. He would nuzzle her neck, purr like an oversized house cat, and even playfully tug at her ponytail with his teeth. Serena marveled at his intelligence, his loyalty, and the bond they had forged. She was his protector, his family, his everything. But as Leo grew, so did the tension among the reserve staff. "He's a wild animal, Serena," they reminded her constantly. "You can't keep him as a pet. He'll turn on you one day." Serena dismissed their warnings, convinced that her relationship with Leo was different, special. She believed love could bridge the gap between human and beast. Eventually, the decision was taken out of her hands. At 3 years old, Leo was relocated to the northern sector of the reserve, a sprawling area where he could roam freely among other lions. Serena was devastated. She argued, pleaded, even threatened to quit. But the reserve's board of directors was firm. "It's for his own good," they insisted. "He needs to be with his kind." That was 2 years ago. Serena hadn't seen Leo since the day they loaded him into the transport truck, his confused eyes searching for her as he let out a guttural roar that still haunted her dreams. She'd told herself it was for the best, that he would adapt to his new environment and live the life nature intended for him. But deep down, she never stopped wondering if he remembered her, if he missed her the way she missed him. Today, all those questions would finally be answered. Against all advice, Serena had decided to visit Leo. She had learned from a ranger friend that he often lingered near a particular watering hole in the northern sector. It wasn't a forbidden area, but venturing there without armed protection was highly discouraged. Yet Serena had come alone, armed only with a mix of hope and trepidation. The walk to the watering hole was arduous. The midday heat was oppressive, and every rustle in the grass made her pulse quicken. She carried a small satchel with a few items Leo might remember. An old scarf he used to play with, a wooden stick they'd often tugged over in a game of fetch, and a handful of dried meat she'd brought as a peace offering. When she reached the watering hole, the scene was serene. A few zebras grazed nearby, and a pair of elephants stood knee-deep in the water, spraying themselves with their trunks. But there was no sign of Leo. Disappointment gnawed at her, but she reminded herself that patience was key in the wild. She sat down on a large rock, scanning the horizon and listening for any sound that might signal his approach. Hours passed. The zebras wandered off and the elephants disappeared into the thickets. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the landscape. Just as Serena was beginning to think she had made a terrible mistake, a low, rumbling growl broke the silence. Her breath caught. She turned slowly, her eyes darting toward the source of the sound. There he was. Leo stood on a rise about 50 yards away, his silhouette framed by the fiery hues of the setting sun. He was bigger than she remembered, his mane now a full, majestic crown of black and gold. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment neither of them moved. Serena's heart raced. Was he angry? Would he see her as a threat, an intruder? Or worse, had he forgotten her altogether? Summoning her courage, Serena stood and called his name softly. "Leo," she said, her voice trembling. "It's me. Do you remember?" Leo began to move toward her. his gait slow and deliberate. Serena's instincts screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay rooted to the spot. She could feel the weight of his presence, the sheer power in his muscles as he closed the distance between them. When he was just a few feet away, he stopped, his massive head tilted as if studying her. Serena reached into her satchel and pulled out the old scarf, holding it out for him to see. "Do you remember this?" she whispered. Leo sniffed the air, his nostrils flaring. For a heart-stopping moment, he remained still, and then, with a deep rumble that was almost a purr, he stepped closer. He nudged the scarf with his nose, his eyes softening. Serena felt a wave of relief and emotion crash over her. She dared to reach out, her hand trembling as it touched his mane. It was coarse, yet soft, just as she remembered. What happened next was beyond anything Serena could have imagined. Leo leaned into her touch, his massive body brushing against hers. He let out a series of low rumbling sounds, a vocalization she recognized as contentment. Tears streamed down her face as she wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. For a few precious moments, it was as if no time had passed, as if they were back in the days when he was her playful, affectionate cub. But the reunion was not without its dangers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the savannah came alive with the sounds of nocturnal predators. A distant roar echoed through the air, and Leo stiffened, his ears twitching. Serena knew she had to leave. Staying after dark was asking for trouble, and she couldn't risk putting Leo or herself in harm's way. Reluctantly, she pulled away. "I have to go," she said, her voice breaking. "But I'll come back, I promise." Leo watched as she began to back away, his amber eyes following her every move. For a moment, she thought he might follow her, but he remained where he was, his regal form silhouetted against the twilight sky. As Serena disappeared into the darkness, she glanced back one last time to see him still standing there, a silent guardian of their shared past. Word of Serena's encounter spread quickly among the reserve staff. Some were amazed, others skeptical, and a few downright furious. "You're lucky to be alive," the manager scolded her. But Serena didn't care. She had seen Leo, touched him, and felt the unbreakable bond they shared. It was a risk she would take again, no matter the consequences. In the weeks that followed, Serena returned to the northern sector whenever she could. Each time, Leo was there, waiting for her. Their interactions became a source of wonder and controversy, a testament to the complex relationship between humans and wildlife. And though Serena knew she couldn't keep him forever, she took solace in the knowledge that, for a brief moment in time, love had bridged the divide between predator and prey, reminding her, and the world, of the extraordinary power of connection. As weeks turned into months, Serena found herself drawn back to the watering hole more frequently. Despite the mounting objections from her colleagues, she couldn't shake the magnetic pull that Leo had on her, a connection that felt almost spiritual. Each meeting was different, a new chapter in their evolving bond. Some days, Leo would greet her with playful energy, bounding toward her with a vigor that belied his size, his deep growls vibrating like affectionate murmurs. Other days, he was more subdued, lying lazily in the shade and letting her sit beside him in peaceful silence. Their reunion became a secret she guarded fiercely. The reserve staff had increased their surveillance of the northern sector after hearing about her first encounter, but Serena had grown adept at evading them. She knew the terrain like the back of her hand, every hidden path, every cluster of acacia trees that could shield her from prying eyes. It wasn't just a desire to see Leo that drove her, it was the understanding that their bond was something others couldn't comprehend. To them, he was a lion, a dangerous predator. To Serena, he was family. One evening, as Serena approached the watering hole, she noticed something unusual. Leo was not alone. Two lionesses lounged beside him, their sleek bodies blending into the golden grass. Serena froze, her pulse quickening. This was new territory, and she wasn't sure how they would react to her presence. She had always known this day would come, the inevitable moment when Leo's life as a wild lion would intersect with her visits. But seeing him integrated into a pride was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. Leo spotted her immediately. His ears perked, and he let out a low, rumbling call. The lionesses turned their heads sharply, their amber eyes locking onto Serena. She felt the weight of their scrutiny, the primal intensity in their gaze. For a moment, she wondered if she had pushed her luck too far. But then Leo rose to his feet, his massive form moving with effortless grace as he approached her. The lionesses watched intently but didn't follow. Instead, they remained where they were, their bodies tense but non-aggressive. Serena let out a shaky breath, grateful for Leo's reassurance. He reached her and rubbed his head against her shoulder, his deep purr vibrating through her chest. It was as if he was introducing her to his pride, showing them that she was not a threat. The lionesses relaxed slightly, though their eyes never left her. Serena felt a surge of awe. Leo was thriving. He had found his place among his kind, and yet he still made room for her in his world. It was a delicate balance, a line she walked carefully each time she visited. As the weeks went by, Serena noticed more changes. Leo's behavior became more territorial. His protective instincts heightened. He would patrol the area around the watering hole, marking his territory with a sense of authority she hadn't seen before. Sometimes she would hear his roars echo across the plains, a sound that sent shivers down her spine even as it filled her with pride. One particularly memorable evening, Serena arrived to find Leo guarding the remains of a recent kill. A young wildebeest lay sprawled in the grass, its fate sealed by the sharp efficiency of the pride. The lionesses were feeding, their powerful jaws tearing through flesh with practiced ease. Leo stood to the side, his gaze scanning the horizon, alert for any scavengers or rival predators. Serena hesitated. This was a raw, visceral display of nature, a stark reminder of the line that separated their worlds. She knew she shouldn't interfere, that this was part of the natural order. But as she watched, she saw something that took her breath away. Leo turned his head toward her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the twilight. Then, to her astonishment, he padded over to the carcass, tore off a piece of meat and carried it to her. He dropped it at her feet, his tail flicking as if he were offering her the choicest cut of the meal. The gesture was both touching and unnerving. Serena crouched down, her heart pounding as she examined the offering. It was a piece of rib, still warm, the smell of blood sharp in the air. She understood what this meant. In his own way, Leo was providing for her, treating her as a member of his pride. "Thank you, Leo," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. She didn't eat the meat, of course, but she accepted the gesture with a nod, knowing that in his world, this was an act of trust and respect. The lionesses seemed unbothered by the interaction, their focus remaining on their meal. Serena marveled at how seamlessly Leo had managed to bridge the gap between two worlds, maintaining his place in the wild while preserving his bond with her. But not every visit was peaceful. One day, Serena arrived to find Leo nursing a deep gash along his flank. The wound was fresh, the edges jagged and oozing blood. Her heart clenched as she approached him, her voice soft and soothing. "What happened to you, boy?" she whispered, crouching beside him. Leo huffed, his body tense but still allowing her to examine him. Serena could see the marks of a territorial fight, claw slashes and bite wounds that told the story of a fierce struggle. She knew better than to interfere too much. Treating him with human medicine could compromise his place in the pride. But she couldn't just leave him like this. From her satchel, she pulled out a small bottle of antiseptic spray, something she always carried for emergencies. She dabbed a bit onto a cloth and carefully applied it to the wound, wincing as Leo flinched. "I know it stings," she said softly, "but it'll help." Leo let out a low growl but didn't move away. Serena worked quickly, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. When she was done, she sat back and watched as he lay down, his body relaxing slightly. It was moments like these that reminded her of the fine line she walked. Leo was still a wild animal, bound by instincts and hierarchies she couldn't fully understand. Yet he allowed her into his world, trusted her in ways that defied logic. As the seasons changed, so did the dynamics of Leo's pride. Cubs were born, adding a new layer of complexity to Serena's visits. The lionesses became more protective, their maternal instincts making them wary of any potential threat. Serena kept her distance, respecting their space while marveling at the tiny, wobbly-legged cubs that played under Leo's watchful eye. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on her decision to meet the lion she raised? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.